I'm Hifsa.
I'm Kylie.
And I'm Mr. Long.
And welcome to The SLAP, the Student-Led Action Podcast.
In today's episode, we will be focusing on mental health related issues that affect students at Colonia High School and schools across the country.
The purpose of this episode is to educate students about various mental health issues that young people face, as well as inform the students of Colonia High School about resources that are available to them if they need help.
A quick trigger warning, this episode is going to contain discussions of suicide, body dysmorphia, and other mental health related issues. All right, so today's episode is going to be focused on mental health. And whenever we talk about mental health, I think the two most common terms that we usually hear the most about are anxiety and depression. But what do those terms actually mean? I'm going to turn to two students from Slack today, Ashley and Heshwin, to help provide some answers for us. So can you guys first just define for me what exactly anxiety and depression are?
My name is Heshwin, and just a brief definition for anxiety is that it's a nervous disorder characterized by a state of excessive uneasiness and apprehension, and is typically coupled with compulsive behavior or panic attacks.
Hi, I'm Ashley, and depression is a mental health disorder characterized by persistently depressed mood or loss of interest in activities, causing significant impairment in daily life.
So because these two terms are usually the ones that people are most familiar with, I'm sure there's a lot of misconceptions that people have about them. Heshwin, what are some of the misconceptions that people have about anxiety?
Some of the most familiar ones that people may hear is that anxiety is not a real disorder, or that less stress can cure your anxiety, or that anxiety attacks can cause you to faint, or that medication is the only thing that can help you, when in actuality it is vital to discuss one's personal situation with your doctor to ensure that the best treatment plan can be implemented.
And then on the other side of that, Ashley, what are some common misconceptions people have about depression?
So some common misconceptions about depression would be that some people say that it's all in their head, or it can only affect women. Depression is a sign of weakness. Talking about it only makes it worse. Medication will change your personality and you'll be taking it forever. And the best way to help someone with depression is to cheer them up. Although we should know if a person is struggling with depression, they should seek out professional help and work with their preferred medical professional to find the best path forward to help them cope.
If we are dealing with anxiety, or we maybe have a friend or a family member who is dealing with anxiety, they might end up in a situation where they have an anxiety attack. What can a person do to either avoid a panic attack themselves or help someone else who might be having one?
In such situations, some of the ways to cope include taking deep breaths. One method includes breathing in for a count of 4, holding for a second, and then breathing out for a count of 4. Another aspect can be focusing on your senses to ground yourself. So this includes naming what you see, hear, smell, etc. And another thing that can be done is to engage in light exercise.
So some other coping mechanisms would include to repeat an interval mantra, which is when you repeat a saying or words that provides comfort. Other techniques are the 4-7-8 breathing technique, which is also known as the relaxing breath, and it involves breathing in for 4 seconds, holding the breath for 7 seconds, and exhaling for 8 seconds. You also can start learning your triggers, meditating, speaking about your feelings, and relaxing your muscles.
Now, what are some time management skills or techniques that can be used to minimize stress and anxiety to hopefully avoid having an anxiety attack?
So one of the techniques would be the Pomodoro technique, and it can be used to study to avoid burnout. And this technique entails using a timer to break down work into intervals, traditionally 25 minutes in length, separated by short breaks, as best studied by researchers, taking into account most efficient study lengths and attention spans. And in order to keep track, there are many websites and apps that can be utilized during study periods. Other techniques, that's Heshwin.
In addition to the Pomodoro technique, various planning techniques such as bullet journaling or a simple to-do list can be used to prioritize and remember deadlines. Another thing that can be implemented is to limit multitasking in order to focus on one task at a time, and also to set breaks for physical activity and mental breaks, and to set time limits for each task.
So I think over this last year, we've all felt a lot of stress. What do you guys recommend as some good ways of coping and dealing with stress?
One of the best ways that we found to cope with stress include taking a walk, journaling, engaging in hobbies, whether that be art, reading, exercising, etc., and even breathing exercises, as we mentioned earlier.
Other good ways to cope is to talk to others or take breaks regularly, getting enough rest, and doing relaxation techniques, which include yoga and meditation.
So something that often doesn't get talked about in the field of mental health, but is really a mental health related issue, is eating disorders and body dysmorphia. So let's talk about what exactly that actually means. What is an eating disorder?
So an eating disorder is a range of psychological conditions that cause unhealthy eating habits. Eating disorders typically develop during adolescence or early adulthood and seem to affect women more than men. However, men can also have them along with any age. You also don't need to be underweight to have an eating disorder or to be at risk.
So what are the different types of eating disorders that a person could develop?
The first eating disorder is anorexia nervosa, which is defined as an eating disorder sometimes characterized by abnormally low body weight and when one has a constant fear of gaining weight. And this causes a distorted perception of their body weight and shape to develop. And people with anorexia will often limit their caloric intake, exercise excessively, use laxatives, and/or force themselves to vomit after eating in order to lose weight. Another eating disorder is bulimia nervosa, which is an eating disorder characterized by having episodes of binge eating or purging. Oftentimes, people with bulimia will feel a lack of control and will restrict themselves during the day but binge or purge later on. And lastly, another eating disorder is binge eating disorder, which is when one regularly eats large amounts of food and lacks control in their eating. Oftentimes, one will feel guilty after binge eating, but try to make up for it by excessively exercising and purging.
And what exactly is body dysmorphia?
So, body dysmorphia is a mental health disorder in which you can't stop thinking about one or more perceived defects or flaws in your appearance, a flaw that appears minor or can't be seen by others.
So how can you help a friend or a peer who might be dealing with body dysmorphia?
So you can help by working on steering conversations away from their appearance or what they see as flaws. You can also provide them with space to talk freely and openly about their feelings. Avoid trying to make someone feel better by talking about your own insecurities or flaws, which can spiral into a more negative conversation.
And what are some red flags that a person might display that could potentially tell you that they have an eating disorder or maybe they're starting to develop one?
Some red flags include, but are not limited to, use of dietary supplements, laxatives or herbal products for weight loss, persistent worry or complaining about being fat and talk of losing weight, adopting an overly restrictive vegetarian diet, skipping meals or making excuses for not eating, expressing depression, disgust, shame, or guilt about eating habits, and eating in secret.
So when we talk about mental health, we often don't take the time to consider how mental health struggles can affect different communities differently. We're going to take a moment and talk with Taina and Dia, who are going to present to us some information about how mental health struggles affect, who are going to tell us a little bit about how mental health affects communities of color, as well as individuals in the LGBTQ plus community. So Taina, what has your research shown you about how mental health affects communities of color?
So from my research, I've gathered that American Indigenous and Alaskan Native people have higher rates of PTSD and alcoholism than any other ethnic racial group, but they only take up 2.09% of the population in 2021. And statistics tell us that about 25% of African Americans seek mental health care compared to 40% of white people. The second leading cause of death in Black youth between the ages of 10 to 19 is suicide. And the stigmatism around mental health in the Black community can be traced back to slavery. The idea that slaves weren't smart enough or even remotely able to develop mental health disorders brought these misconceptions. These notions created the idea that any signs of mental illness in Black people are seen as being tired, lazy, and incapable. This is because of slave masters who created the lazy Black people stereotype, which continues to be harmful in today's society. Hispanic and Latina children and adolescents are at a significantly greater risk of suffering with mental health issues than white children. This is due to cultural stigma, lack of knowledge, accessibility, language barriers, and so much more. In Hispanic and Latina culture and religions, the idea of mental health issues and mental illness is seen as a sign of something wrong with the person, leading to them being less likely to reach out for help. The leading cause of death in Asian American and Pacific Islander people in 2017 was suicide. While this racial and ethnic group has the lowest reported rates of mental health issues, this does not mean that Asian American and Pacific Islander people do not suffer with mental health issues. The minority myth feeds into these notions and puts pressure on adolescents in this group to live up to the socioeconomic success of Asian American Pacific Islanders.
And Dia, what about the research on LGBTQ individuals? How is mental health affecting them?
Well, for LGBTQ plus adults have double the risk of suicide attempts, and the risk of suicide is even greater in LGBTQ plus teens and young adults. The 2020 survey from the Trevor Project found that, shockingly, 40% of LGBTQ plus youth seriously considered suicide in the past year. Suicidal tendencies among Black LGBTQ plus youth, especially among transgender and non-binary people, is very high, more than 20% compared to cisgendered Black LGBTQ plus youth. Transgender youth have 4 times the risk of depression. 28% of LGBTQ plus youth reported feeling depressed most of the time during the previous 30 days, and 60% of LGBTQ plus youth reported stopping some of their usual activities due to hopelessness and sadness.
So following all this research, what do you feel like people should take away from these stats about mental health in these communities?
I think that people should realize that just because someone may seem like they aren't struggling with their mental health doesn't mean that they're perfectly fine. And just because someone is subjected to more or less privilege than others doesn't mean that they don't struggle as well.
I think that the biggest takeaway from all this information is that POC groups suffer from mental illnesses at the same rate as white people, but suffer more with mental illness due to many factors, including culture, religion, accessibility, societal stigmas, socioeconomic disparities, and so much more. When we discuss mental illness and reaching out for help and addressing the topic, we need to make sure to include how much harder it is for POC to suffer with mental illness.
Now Kylie and Hivza are going to interview Miss Giordano from Colonia High School, who is the student assistance counselor, and Miss Grasso, who is the advisor for Woodbridge Township for the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide.
Hi. So would you like to explain what a SAC counselor is and how you work with the students of Colonia High School?
Sure. My name is Miss Giordano, and I'm the student assistance counselor at Colonia High School. I am here 5 days a week at Colonia High School, and my office is located in the main lobby next to the main office. So I'm also not located near the other counselors, so I think that that's something I want everybody to know. My job is a student assistance counselor, or the SAC, and it is different from a school counselor because school counselors are assigned alphabetically. So depending on your last name, you get a specific counselor, and they have a certain number of kids, and then those are the kids that they work with, and they work with them, for the 4 years that you're here at Colonia High School. As a student assistance counselor, it's a little bit different. So I do work with all 4 grades, and I work with, I guess you could say, everybody else's kids. Like, I don't have my own. Everybody still has a school counselor, but you could also work with the SAC in addition to that. So some of the kids that I work with, I'll get a list from the middle school SAC, and she'll give me a list of kids that she used to work with in the middle school, and I try to meet them as freshmen and introduce myself and start, where she kind of left off, and I develop my own relationship with them. But also, I get a lot of my referrals from the school counselors. So I'll get a referral from a school counselor. I get a lot of referrals from kids that I do see, and then they'll say like, oh, you need to see my friend, or I'm going to send my friend to come see you. So sometimes an administrator will give me a referral. Like, let's say someone gets into trouble, and all of a sudden the student opens up to an administrator and says that they have a lot going on at home. This is what's been going on. Then what will happen is the administrator will say, oh, Ms. Giordano, I found out some information about this particular family. It sounds like they could use somebody else in addition to their regular counselor to speak to. So I work with kids here, and I get my referrals. I'll take referrals any way I could get them, because I also have teachers that will, sometimes a student might linger after class and talk to a teacher about something that's going on at home, or they may have done a project or a report. So sometimes a teacher will also recommend a student come to see me. So I do get my students from all over. However they come to me, I don't care. I'll take them any way I could get them. And I see kids individually. Sometimes I see kids in groups. I see kids now through Zoom or through Google Meets. I also have a Google Voice, so some kids I text with the Google Voice. I have a Twitter, I try to send out, some information on that way. I've been delivering food to a couple families that we have that are struggling. And while I'm dropping off food a couple days a week, I sit and talk on the porch. So I do porch visits, sometimes at people's houses, when I deliver food. Sometimes I do porch visits, I call them. So I also have a 9th grade girls group that I meet with every other week, a 9th grade freshman girls group. I feel like they were having a hard time knowing how high school worked and where should they go for this and where should they go for that, and just trying to acclimate and meet other people and things. So that's just the gist of how I work with kids here at the high school. Thanks.
So can you tell us about the process of how a student can schedule a meeting with you?
Okay, so like I mentioned before, I could get students from teachers, from counselors, from administrators. You could email me. If you notice on our school website, you could go to the staff section and you could get all of the emails for all of the faculty here at school. So you could email me and say, oh, my name is blah, 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 and I'd like to set up a meeting with you. So you could email me directly. Like everybody else's email, it's jacqueline.giordano@woodbridge.k12.nj.us. So you could go to the staff emails and get it from there. You could call me directly on the phone. I mean, kids get a kick out of that, but I do have people call. 732-499-6502. Sometimes I'll have messages from kids, or, they might tell their parents that they would like to speak to me, and then I get parent calls, and the parent will say like, oh, we don't know how to do this, and I'm just reaching out to you. So, you could call me on my school telephone number as well. We do have kids in school, we're hybrid, and I have kids just stop by, and they'll say like, oh, Miss G, I'd really like to talk to you. I know somebody that talks to you, or I have a lot going on, and I was hoping that we could set up a meeting. So, you could always stop by my office. The counseling department, if you go under the counseling department of the school website, if you go to, the school website under Colonia High School, then you go to Explore, and then you're able to go to different departments, and you can go to the counseling department, and they have all these different tabs to click on, and there's one that says, it's a form for requesting an appointment for a counselor. So I'm also included that way as well. I've never gotten one that way, but they said that they included me there. So it's more of the reaching out to me. Once you reach out to me, then we set something set something up. We say, oh, do you want to text me? I can give you my Google Voice number. Do you want to email me? Do you want to do Zoom or Google Meets? I have some kids that are not coming to school. They're just virtual. But if they live close enough, they'll either get a ride here or they'll walk here, and I'll meet with them at 9 o'clock, 9:30 time. Or if I have a senior that has no fourth block, they'll drive to meet me. So, we'll set it up, whatever works best for you. We just have to figure that out between us. So it's just the getting in touch with me part so we could set up how we're going to communicate. So
how has the conversation around mental health changed from when you first started your career to now?
I've been doing this for a pretty long time, I'll say, as a student assistance counselor. I've worked at 2 of the high schools as a student assistance counselor. And I feel like people are more open to talk about mental health now. People will talk about the fact that they go to outside counseling. TV shows, I feel like, include therapists. Movies include therapists. Music includes, therapists. So I feel like it's becoming more politically correct or acceptable to say that you have a counselor, to say that you're going for counseling, and to mention to someone else, like maybe you need somebody to talk to. So I feel like in the time that I've started and where we are now, I mean, even right now with the pandemic, I feel like it's easier now than ever. You have commercials through the pandemic. They'll talk about your mental health. They'll talk about seeing a counselor. They talk about telehealth. You don't even have to go anymore. Now you could do it like a Zoom, and you could see them virtually without leaving your house. I feel like the pandemic has really made mental health more acceptable to talk about. Even when you watch news, they'll tell you how to deal with mental health, how to deal with anxiety, how to deal with depression, techniques to use, numbers to call. I feel like even the governor, when he does his daily reports on Channel 12, he'll mention hotlines. He'll mention how important it is to get counseling. Also, I feel like they've done a lot more with the curriculum. Every so many years, I will be on a curriculum committee, and they're updating alcohol and drugs and mental health curriculum in the health classes. I've done the psychology curriculum a few times because I did teach psychology for a few years before I was a SAC. And they'll update the psychology curriculum. They do some mental health stuff in that. I feel like, now we're doing the SEL surveys once a week in homeroom or in your classes, and they're asking about your mental health. So I feel like it is becoming much more, in vogue to talk about your mental health. And people want to know how you're doing because people are so isolated right now. So I think it's been becoming more and more popular as the years have gone on. But I also feel like the pandemic kicked it into overdrive, talking about mental health and where to go for mental health resources, and that it's okay to go and talk to somebody. It's okay to make a telephone call and call a hotline. One positive of the pandemic is that speaking about mental health has become more acceptable, checking in on somebody's mental health. Not that I think that, anything of the pandemic other than that has been positive, but it's made it more acceptable to talk about mental health.
So what resources do you recommend to students who are struggling with mental health issues?
Okay. Couple hotlines I'm going to give you. For students that are in the building and that have gone to Colonia High School, I don't know if you've ever noticed in the bathrooms. In all of the bathrooms, I always have second floor hotline. And the second floor hotline is a hotline 24 hours, 7 days a week. And it's for, I would say, like middle school up to young adults, like young 20s. And it's a hotline for people that want to make a telephone call and speak to somebody over the phone. You could also text them. You could also email them. But it's called Second Floor. And the telephone number is 888-222-2228. And like I said, you could text them, you could email them. And it's second, like the number 2ND floor. So Second Floor is a very popular hotline. And I think that, it's good to have somebody to talk to, because sometimes you might get into a crisis, or you get into a situation, or you might have a fight with a family member or a breakup, and you just don't know what to do. What's nice is that it's a 24-hour 7 hotline. Another referral that I believe I have in the bathrooms as well is a hotline like New Jersey Mental Health Cares. It's the Mental Health Association of New Jersey, and they've teamed up with what's called New Jersey Hope and Healing. And they have a hotline again, and 7 days a week. It's from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. It's for adults and teenagers, so you're able to call them from 8 to 8, like I said, 7 days a week. They're at 866-202-HELP, HELP, which is 4357. So that's another hotline. But what I also like is if you go on their website, and I looked it up a couple different ways. I put in New Jersey Hope and Healing, and I looked for their virtual groups, or I went under MHANJ.org, Mental Health Association of New Jersey.org. And if you go on their website, they give you their virtual groups. So since the pandemic has started, they've been running all types of virtual groups weekly. They have a school nurse group, they have a teachers group, they have a single parent group, they have a college student support group, they have a Spanish speaking group. They have all different types of mental health groups running. It's free, and you could always go on, a couple weeks in a row. It's not like a standing appointment. You could go as needed. So I think that that's been very, very popular and an excellent resource. So that's another hotline. And the suicide hotline is always another number that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's 855-NJ Hopeline, NJ HOPELINE. It's the New Jersey Suicide Prevention Hotline. And that's another resource. But I would say those 3 are big resources. There's a food pantry in town. Another way that you could get some of these resources is if you could go to my Google website. You could check out my Google website, and I have some hotlines, I have some resources, I have some referrals. There's some bereavement referrals. There's been a lot of loss during COVID, and I feel like more and more people are needing to talk about the loss of their loved ones. And one of the resources on my Google website is a place called Imagine. And right now they're doing their counseling virtually also. It used to be in Westfield, and they've since moved to Mountainside. But they have groups. They do individual. They again see from young children to elderly people. So they've been offering a lot of different groups. They're another resource. I would check them out online. Once again, it's called Imagine. I have the food pantry resource. A lot of people have lost their jobs, financial restraints in families. So I put that up on my Google website as well. So there's a lot of different things going on right now, whether it's loss of income, whether it's mental health, anxiety, depression, loss. So I feel like there's a lot of different resources that you have to assess with what the person's looking for. And anytime that you meet with me and we talk, I always see where you're at. And if I feel like a hotline might not be enough, or meeting with me every other week or once a week for a while, if I feel like you may still need an outside referral, I always have a list of agencies in the area that have worked out for kids. And like, again, they either run groups or they'll see you individually. That kind of stuff would go by your insurance. But I have two different referral lists. I have a whole Medicaid list or New Jersey Kid Care list, and then I have another who have private insurance. So I try to cater to what it is that somebody needs. I also, like I said, I have a Twitter where sometimes I'll send out hotlines. Sometimes I'll send out different times of the year, like May is Mental Health Awareness Month. There's always different things that are coming up. So I try to tweet about them. And I'm at Counselor Miss G. That's my Twitter account. So please follow me. I could use more followers. But I do try to put some hotlines up there and some different resources and things like that as well. I think it's important that everybody stay connected with friends. No matter what age you are, it's important to stay connected. It's not a good time to be isolating. You want to be able to talk to people. Try to get outside. I don't care if you sit on your porch. Try to get some fresh air. Try to get some vitamin D, sunshine. Try to get a little exercise if the weather's nice. But these are all good things for our mental health. Vitamin D, exercise helps the brain produce serotonin, and, serotonin's good for the brain. We all need to decompress. Every day is stressful in its own way. So I think it's important to decompress through exercise, through staying connected with friends, through talking to somebody, but not to keep it all in. That's the most important part, not to keep it all in.
Hello, my name is Janine Grasso. I am a board member of the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide and the manager of the Woodbridge Township Youth Council.
Hi, Ms. Grasso. So our first question for you today is, what is the Society for the Prevention of Teen Suicide, and how did it originate?
Okay, sadly, the SPTS, as we call it for short, because that's a very long title of an organization, was begun many years ago. I'm going to say it's over 15. I always forget to look back and see the exact date, but it was started by two families that lost their teens to suicide. Of course, they were so sad and wanted to do anything they could to make sure that other families didn't have to go through with this. So it's a nonprofit organization out of Monmouth County. And what they did, there were a few steps that they took at the beginning. One was to lobby the FDA to make sure that labels on medications that do cause suicide ideations were labeled as such. Prior to that, it wasn't identified on the label. The second thing they did is they lobbied the state of New Jersey to make it mandatory that all teachers and school staff have 2 hours of suicide prevention training every 5 years. That is still in effect. You can ask any of your teachers, unless they're brand new, they've had it sometimes once, sometimes twice. I am a retired educator, and lots of times people are calling me back going, hey, we saw you on that website, because I do one portion of it. And because I was actually brought on to the board because I am in education, and they really needed a voice from the education world versus the corporate world that were on the board. And I tried to explain to them that schools don't have a lot of money to do extra things. So if we're going to do this, let's do it. Raise money, and we do it. So it's still to this day, teachers in New Jersey do not have to pay to take that mandatory training. We do a golf outing every year to fund the teachers and school people being able to take that training for free. So we're really proud of that. as far as when it got to being the youth involved, about 8 years ago, we had our very first Youth Wellness Summit in Jackson Liberty High School. And from that, we have formed youth councils. We now have one in Monmouth and Ocean County, have one together, and we also have one in Woodbridge Township. So we're hoping to extend our numbers. We were up to 7 youth summits, and last year, believe it or not, Middlesex County was the only one that got to attend the youth summit prior to the pandemic. We had 9 planned for last year. So we are, each year we're growing a little bit more and trying to reach as many teens as we can.
That's amazing. So what steps can be taken to help prevent teen suicide, and how does this organization work towards prevention as well?
One of the most important things we believe is we need to talk about it. I was, listening prior to Ms. Giordano, and she's saying the same thing with mental health. We have to talk about issues that affect all of us in order to get some clarity and get some help for ourselves. But we do have many ways. We have training videos out there for teachers and staff. We have a video for parents that is Not My Child. We have the Youth Wellness Summits that are, as I told you, we had 9 planned for last year. And we do have a great social media presence right now. I don't follow all of it. I'm pretty much an older person. I'm happy that I can get on Facebook, but I know that it's on Instagram, Twitter, and probably other things that I just don't know about. And with our youth councils, I feel as an educator, we have made the most impact by talking with teens. I'm a great teen advocate and believe totally that teens know way more about what goes on with teens than we do. And if we're going to help teens, we need to talk to teens.
How has the conversation around mental health changed from when you first started your career to now?
Now look at the fact that I'm a retired educator, so that was a long time ago, and truthfully, mental health issues were not even talked about at all. We have come so far. I'm proud of us humans, to tell you the truth, because it wasn't talked about, it was looked down upon. Sadly, there are still cultures that do look down upon mental illness, but we couldn't even talk about it. You didn't mention suicide. That was so taboo, because the feeling then was if you talked about it, someone would want to do it. That is the biggest falsehood going, and still there are some people who still believe that, but we really believe that talking about it, and that's to me the complete difference now than it was years ago.
So what resources do you recommend to students who are struggling with their mental health issues?
One of the things we do in the Youth Council is really try to get the message across that we have to talk about it. Just as I said before, we have to talk to each other, but that's not enough for teens. Teens also then need to reach out to an adult who may not be able to provide the help, but can get them to someone who can provide the help. So we have our big term in our organization is a trusted adult, and we really work on asking students to identify who their trusted adults are. You could have one trusted adult in school, you could have a different trusted adult away from school. Mr. Long is a trusted adult of many of our former and present members. And what that means, the trusted adult is so important because it means that it's a person you can go to, talk to them about what you're going through, and you know that if you need additional help, they will get you to that additional help. So that's really what is important. One of the things that the youth council students struggle with is that if a friend tells them something in confidence, they don't want to tell anyone else. And I try really hard to make sure that they understand there are some things you have to tell. A person's life is more important than your confidence. But there's the second floor hotline we totally utilize. In fact, I've called it myself during a situation with someone that I had followed a procedure and said, you know what, I've been doing this a long time, but I don't know everything either. So the second floor hotline, I think, is one of the most accessible things for students, for teens now. And as the number is 888-222-2228, second floor. On our website, which is www.sbtsusa.org, there are so many resources. There are resources if there has been someone dying by suicide. There's resources for teens, for parents, and there's so many resources. So I would, always look on that website. But you have it right in your own school. There are many people in your school that are willing to help. It's just reaching out to them and saying, I need help. We're not alone. No one's alone. We have a wonderful community. You have a great school community. There are always people who will help, but you have to ask and you have to reach out to someone.
And lastly, how can we continue to encourage positive mental health practices and break down the stigmas around mental health?
Well, I still believe that's still talking about it. And, really, getting the message out there that we're, if I break my arm, I don't think I would be looked down upon. If my emotions are broken, I don't think that should have us, being looked down upon either. But talking about it, I do know the Youth Council has really had an interest in this, and hopefully when we get back to normal, we can partner with other groups in your schools and Ms. Giordano to do a wellness day and really bring in some resources. There are plenty of resources in the community, in the county, through the health office at Woodbridge Public Health. There's plenty of organizations and resources that are willing to come right to the school and have the kids maybe go through it during, could be lunch, could be a different, whatever. We'll work it out. But I think that's a great idea. Woodbridge has had it at least once. They were planning to have it last year, and it did not. The pandemic stopped it. But I'm willing to work with anyone there to make this happen. I know I have a lot of resources, and you guys, the staff in your school have plenty of resources to help this. So if anybody's interested, Mr. Long knows how to get a hold of me.